Welcome to a quiet exploration of one of the world's most overlooked mysteries. Tonight we drift deep into the heart of the Amazon, into a place where towering trees guard ancient secrets, and where hints of forgotten civilizations lie just beneath the forest floor. For centuries, these earthworks have slept under the canopy, untouched and unseen, like giants resting beneath layers of green silence. Before we begin, take a moment to subscribe and tap the bell. It helps this peaceful history channel grow and ensures you never miss another calming journey into the past. In this episode, Sleeping Giants of the Amazon, Earthworks Hidden for Centuries, we'll gently uncover what the jungle has been guarding for thousands of years. Here's what we'll be exploring tonight. For most of human memory, the Amazon has been described as a world beyond worlds, a green immensity so vast, so layered, and so endlessly tangled that even the greatest explorers could only guess at what it might be hiding. To step into its interior is to step into an older rhythm of the earth, where light filters down in narrow golden threads, and every sound seems softened by the leaves. The air is warm, heavy, and rich with life. Vines hang like great ropes from the canopy, orchids cling to branches high above, and the ground itself is blanketed in a velvet darkness of soil and roots. For centuries, people who lived outside the region believed this endless forest to be primeval and untouched, a place too wild, too humid, and too nutrient-poor to support any large civilization. It was imagined as a green desert, abundant in life, yes, but empty of structured human history. But the forest had its own story, one it kept quietly. And in the stillness beneath its towering trees, that story waited. The Amazon is not simply a forest. It is a living architecture, a cathedral built of trunks and leaves, rising layer upon layer until the sky disappears. Each branch, each root, each fallen leaf adds another step to a structure that grows, dies, and rebuilds itself continuously. Trees fall and instantly sprout new growth. The underbrush swallows anything left on the ground. Vines pull themselves upward seeking light, and bromeliads collect rainwater in tiny pools that become worlds of their own. In such a place, anything set upon the land, stone, wood, earth, even the outlines of human intention, can vanish under the sheer weight of time and plant life. The people who lived in this rainforest thousands of years ago would have understood this intimately. They knew that the jungle was both a giver and a taker, that it revealed nothing unless it chose to. And perhaps in a quiet way, this understanding shaped their legacy. Not in monuments of towering stone, but in the geometry of the earth itself. Carved into soil, shaped into boundaries, and set so deeply into the ground that even when the forest reclaimed the surface, something of human presence remained underneath. When early European explorers entered the Amazon basin, they found scattered groups of indigenous peoples living in small villages. These groups, resilient and adapted to the environment, described a past filled with larger, more complex communities. Some spoke of riverbank towns stretching for miles. Others mentioned plazas where thousands once gathered. A few told stories of raised roads that cut straight across the landscape, connecting distant settlements. Yet these tales were dismissed by outsiders as exaggerations or myths. How could such societies have existed in a place where the soil was so thin, where rain washed nutrients away, where the forest seemed to swallow everything whole? What the explorers did not understand was that the forest they saw was not the forest those earlier civilizations knew. Nature had not simply covered the land, it had transformed it. Trees had grown where plazas once stood. Vines had draped themselves over the edges of ancient ditches. Moss had softened the outlines of geometric earth mounds. Animals had created burrows through what were once ceremonial paths. And above all, the relentless rhythm of the rainforest, the constant growth, the endless recycling of organic matter, had erased the visible map of human settlement. Yet the forest had not erased everything. Beneath layers of roots and soil, beneath centuries of fallen leaves and shifting sediments, shapes remained. Circles too perfect to be accidental, squares aligned with uncanny precision, long straight lines carved through the ground. These were not natural formations. They were remnants, traces of intention pressed into the land. But for generations, no one could see them, because to see them required rising above the forest in a way that was impossible before the modern era. On the ground, walking among the dense vegetation, a person could pass directly across an earthwork and never realize it. The walls of a 200-meter-wide circle, once perhaps the boundary of a gathering place or ceremonial center, now appeared only as gentle rises in the terrain, softened by soil and foliage. Trenches that once formed the edges of plazas had filled with rain and sediment, becoming shallow depressions where ferns and saplings grew. Raised roads had become indistinguishable from the natural contours of hills. Even the largest structures, earth mounds taller than a person, were masked under thick layers of forest floor. The Amazon had drawn a living curtain over them. Imagine an ancient pathway, one that once guided hundreds of people on foot between settlements. After the societies declined or migrated, the path would have been left unused. Leaves would fall upon it, creating the first layer of cover. Rain would soften those leaves into rich humus. Seeds would land upon that humus and begin to sprout. Roots would push downward, weaving themselves through the soil. Animals would dig burrows. Termites would build towers. Larger trees, sensing open space, would stretch their roots outward until they claimed the path fully. And so, in a matter of decades, the road would disappear from sight entirely. Yet beneath all that change, the soil packed tightly by thousands of footsteps would still hold a faint trace of the old direction, a hardened plane, a subtle line, a slightly different texture, a secret, but not an erased one. This is how the forest hid a civilization, not by destroying it, but by folding it into itself. For centuries, the world assumed that this green expanse was untouched wilderness. But the truth was more complex. The earth beneath the trees had been shaped, sculpted, and engineered by people who understood the land deeply. They built geometric enclosures, enormous ditches, earthen avenues, raised fields designed to resist flooding, and networks of settlements that stretched for miles. These were not small, isolated groups. They were organized societies with knowledge of astronomy, geometry, hydrology, and agriculture. They created landscapes of purpose, places for ceremony, living, farming, and gathering. Yet because they used earth instead of stone, their work blended back into the land far more easily than that of the Egyptians, the Maya, or the Mesopotamians. Stone temples can resist the jungle. Earth foundations, no matter how carefully crafted, cannot, at least not on the surface. If a person from those ancient civilizations could return to the region today, they might be astonished by the depth of the forest where open plazas once lay. Where they once saw starlight above a gathering ground, they would now see branches interwoven so densely that only a few fragments of light make their way down. The ground that once echoed with the voices of hundreds would now crunch under a layer of centuries' worth. The geometric boundaries of their plazas, once clear and meaningful, would be invisible beneath roots and ferns and slopes created by the natural settling of earth. And yet the land would still carry the memory of what they built. It is easy to imagine a quiet morning thousands of years ago, when the forest was not yet as dense and the sky was visible from the center of a large earthwork. People might have gathered at dawn, watching the alignment of shadows cast by wooden posts or earthen walls. Children might have played near the edges of the ditch. Traders might have passed through, carrying food, pottery, or woven tools. Rituals may have unfolded under the open light of the sun. The air, warm and humid, would have carried the scent of fresh soil, and those who built these places would have understood that the earth beneath their feet was shaped by human hands, hands working together toward a shared future. Over time, as populations shifted, as climate patterns changed, or as societies restructured themselves, these places were slowly abandoned. When human maintenance ceased, the first seedlings would have appeared tiny at first, but soon growing into bushes and saplings. With no one to clear them, they would thicken. Gradually, the open plaza would become a grove, then a small forest, then part of the great continuum of the Amazon. Generations later, Only the elders might remember that long ago there was something different on that spot. Then even those memories would fade. Once the forest had taken hold, there was no easy way to uncover what had been lost. A person could walk over the ancient ditch of a 300-meter square earthwork and see only ordinary vegetation. A researcher could study the soil and find nothing visible to the naked eye. The trees stood too close together for anyone to gain a sense of the shape beneath. The land from ground level looked natural, unplanned, untouched. But the forest does not simply erase human lines, it buries them under its own patterns. And sometimes those patterns can be read if one knows how to look from above. The moment that changed everything came only in the past few decades when satellites, planes, and eventually drones began capturing images of the Amazon from the air. From this new vantage point, the forest canopy looked like a solid surface, a vast field of green. But where the earthworks lay beneath, the shapes of trees differed subtly. The canopy rose slightly along the old walls of ditches. It dipped a little where trenches once circled open plazas. Lines of vegetation sometimes formed long, faint corridors following the path of ancient raised roads. When researchers first examined these aerial photographs, they noticed something astonishing. The ground beneath the forest held shapes too regular, too intentional to be natural. Circles appeared perfect circles hundreds of meters wide. Nearby were squares, also geometric and precise. Some earthworks consisted of long, rectangular enclosures. Others combined multiple shapes and connected patterns. A few even revealed complex networks of parallel lines or radiating pathways. These were not the works of accident or erosion. These were signs of design. Slowly, researchers began mapping the shapes as more forests were cleared for agriculture. Not ideal, but revealing they uncovered even more earthworks hidden beneath the canopy. Every new discovery made the same silent argument. The Amazon had once supported far more extensive human habitation than previously believed. But why were these geometric forms so hard to identify from the ground? Because the jungle, in its quiet and steady persistence, had mastered the art of concealment. The roots of trees push outward as they grow, reshaping the soil, smoothing the edges of old earthworks. Leaves fall constantly, creating a layer of organic matter that builds up year after year. Rainwater softens everything, blending the edges of ditches into gentle slopes. Animals disturb the soil, carrying seeds that sprout wherever they land. Even the weight of humidity helps soften the lines of human construction. Over centuries, these processes transform a once clear shape into subtle terrain differences, slight rises and depressions almost indistinguishable from natural formations. And yet, these traces endured. They endured because the people who built them used earth on a massive scale. Some ditches spread across areas larger than multiple football fields. Some earthen walls were originally several meters high. Their size gave them longevity. Hidden or not, the memory of their shape remained in the soil. The forest hid these civilizations because it does not favor open spaces. Anything unattended becomes overgrown. Light invites growth, and growth covers everything. The moment humans left these places, the jungle took them back with quiet, unstoppable speed. Still, the earth remembers. Under every tree root and every fern, the geometry persists. Under the humus and the shifting soil lies the imprint of a structured, organized society, one that saw the land not as an impenetrable wilderness, but as a place where human life could flourish in harmony with the environment. What the world once believed to be untouched nature was, in many places, a landscape carefully shaped by ancient hands. For centuries, the forest kept this truth hidden. Not maliciously but naturally, simply by being itself. A force of life so powerful and continuous that it could cover, protect, and disguise entire histories. And now, as technology reveals what eyes on the ground never could, the forest's secrets are beginning to emerge. The green curtain is lifting gently to show that humanity's past stretches deeper into the Amazon than anyone ever imagined. For most of history, the Amazon was a world seen only from within. Walked through, paddled across, breathed in. Travelers, explorers, researchers, and even the people who lived along its rivers all experienced it from the ground, at eye level, surrounded by endless green walls of vegetation. The jungle, from that perspective, felt infinite. It was a world where visibility extended only a few meters, where even the brightest sunlight filtered down as dim, shifting patches of gold, taches of gold. For centuries, people assumed that what could not be seen from the ground simply did not exist. And so, when stories of ancient pathways, vast clearings, or geometric structures were mentioned by indigenous communities, they were heard but not fully believed. After all, no one walking through the forest ever saw a circle or a square. No one ever stumbled upon a perfectly straight line stretching into the distance. Canopy hid everything. The truth, however, was quietly waiting above the leaves, visible only from a view no human had ever possessed until very recently. And when the first aerial clues appeared, they arrived not with thunder or spectacle, but with a stillness so profound that only those paying close attention understood the magnitude of what they were seeing. In the second half of the 20th century, as satellites began circling the Earth, the Amazon appeared to them as an unbroken green surface. From space, the forest looked calm, almost serene, a textured emerald blanket stretching for millions of square kilometers. For years, these early images were blurry, low in resolution, and limited in detail. But even then, a few curious researchers noticed something faint, subtle curves, straight sections, and slight changes in vegetation tone that didn't match the random patterns of natural forest growth. These early hints were too delicate to interpret, too incomplete to publish. But they were enough to raise a question. Could the forest be hiding more than anyone realized? The real shift began when high-resolution satellite imaging became available. Suddenly, the canopy no longer looked like a flat texture. It had nuance, patches of differing heights, distinctive shadows, and tiny breaks in the pattern. Vegetation growing over slight rises in the soil reflected light differently. Depressions produced darker tones. And in some places, the canopy formed shapes eerily smooth, deliberate, and regular. A circle, for example, is not a shape the forest naturally favors. Nature's curves tend to be irregular, softened, or incomplete. Vegetation grows in response to soil, water, and sunlight, forming patterns that may seem symmetrical but rarely achieve precision. So when a researcher noticed a near-perfect circle spanning hundreds of meters, visible only as a faint difference in tree height, something clicked. It was too round, too consistent, and near it, there appeared to be a square, its edges aligned much more cleanly than any natural formation should allow. A few kilometers away, a line ran straight for an astonishing distance, cutting across natural ridges and dips. Straight lines of that length are almost never natural. Even rivers meander, hills curve, and plant growth bends around obstacles. But this line did not bend. It persisted, unwavering, as though drawn by a hand with a clear intention. The first reaction among many scientists was skepticism. Perhaps these were geological features. Maybe they were the remnants of old logging paths or erosion patterns. Some thought the shapes might be illusions, artifacts from the imaging process, pixels arranged in misleading patterns. But as more images were collected, these shapes appeared again and again, in different regions, under different types of vegetation, under varying conditions of light. The patterns became too consistent to ignore. Still, satellite photos alone were not enough to confirm anything. They were promising, they were compelling, but they lacked the clarity needed to say definitively, these shapes were made by human hands. The forest had draped itself over the land so thoroughly that even from above, details were obscured. But the aerial perspective had whispered a new truth, a truth that would grow louder in the years to come. The next great step in this quiet revelation came with the rise of aerial surveys, first with small planes, then with helicopters, and eventually with drones. A plane flying over the forest at low altitude offered a perspective completely different from anything available at ground level. Looking out of a small aircraft window at the canopy below, a researcher could see how trees formed a layer, how their heights varied, how shadows fell in deliberate ways. Certain areas appeared smoother, more uniform. Others dipped or curved in ways that suggested something below them was shaping the soil. And when planes passed over areas where deforestation had unfortunately occurred, the view revealed the forest's secrets in plain sight. Where trees had been cleared, often for cattle ranching or agriculture, vast earthworks appeared as though resurfacing after centuries of sleep. Workers clearing land might have had no idea what lay beneath. But from the air, the structures became undeniable. Massive circles, squared enclosures, long trenches, and networks of lines became visible, stretching across fields where only months earlier the jungle had stood. These were the same shapes hinted at by satellites, now revealed with clarity. Researchers began comparing these ground-exposed structures with the satellite clues from still forested areas. The correspondence was astonishing. The faint circular patterns in tree height matched perfectly with excavated ditches. Straight lines in the canopy aligned exactly with ancient roads or boundaries. Squares hidden under vegetation revealed themselves as the same geometric earthworks seen in cleared zones. This confirmation opened the door to a profound new understanding. The forest had been hiding hundreds, perhaps thousands, of ancient structures, many of them enormous, many of them strikingly precise. Drones changed everything further. Unlike planes, drones could fly low, hover, and capture extremely detailed images. They could explore inaccessible areas, follow the ridges of old earthworks, and scan terrain inch by inch. Their cameras captured subtle changes in soil color, gentle rises and falls in elevation, and patterns of vegetation growth invisible to the naked eye. A drone could reveal, for example, that a line of trees was slightly taller on one side of an invisible boundary, something that might indicate a buried wall or ditch. Or it could detect a ring of different soil density, where ancient construction had compacted the earth centuries ago. And yet, even drones had limitations. The canopy was still a barrier. No matter how advanced the camera, it couldn't see through layers of leaves. It could reveal signs, clues, hints, traces, but not the full structures lying beneath. The jungle still protected its secrets, still held them close. Then came LIDAR. LIDAR, short for light detection and ranging, was the breakthrough that transformed hints into certainty. Mounted on drones or planes, LIDAR sent pulses of light downward in millions of tiny beams. Most beams struck leaves or branches and bounced back, but some continued downward, slipping through tiny gaps until they reached the ground. By measuring the time it took for each beam to return, scientists could map the forest floor in 3 dimensions, even when the canopy was dense overhead. For the first time in history, humans were able to peel away the forest layer digitally, revealing the terrain beneath with extraordinary precision. What appeared on those LIDAR-generated maps stunned even seasoned experts. Under the canopy, hidden from human eyes for centuries, lay massive geometric complexes. Some were circles so large that entire neighborhoods could fit inside them. Others were squares, rectangles, or combinations of shapes linked together. Trenches stretched for kilometers. Raised roads ran as straight as engineered highways. Platforms, mounds, and causeways appeared, features impossible to detect without this technology. It was as though an entire forgotten landscape had been waiting quietly, intact beneath the forest's shelter. Imagine the moment a researcher first scrolled across a LIDAR map and saw a perfect circle emerge from the data. The outline crisp, the ditch depth measurable, the symmetry unquestionable. Or imagine moving the cursor across a valley and seeing geometric shapes repeat, forming patterns that clearly reflected human planning. It was like discovering a ghost imprint of a civilization, one that had lived, built, celebrated, and eventually disappeared, leaving behind only the outlines of their world. The most astonishing part was how widespread these structures were. They did not appear only in one isolated region, but across vast stretches of western and southern Amazonia. As more surveys were conducted, more shapes emerged from the digital forest floor. What had once been dismissed as isolated anomalies were now understood as fragments of an immense network of settlements, structured, interconnected, and remarkably intentional. Each new LIDAR survey added to the picture. In one place, an enormous ring complex appeared, with multiple concentric circles connected by straight avenues. In another, square enclosures lay arranged in patterns suggesting ceremonial or governmental functions. Elsewhere, causeways ran arrow straight across floodplains, elevated to remain passable, even during rainy seasons. In some regions, clusters of earthworks formed what appeared to be urban centers, dense networks of plazas, avenues, and habitation mounds. The forest, it seemed, had grown over entire landscapes reshaped by human ingenuity. What made these discoveries even more striking was the quiet contrast between the simplicity of the earthworks, the use of soil, ditches, and embankments, complexity of the planning they reflected. These were not random constructions. As more researchers began studying these aerial clues, a quiet shift occurred in the way people thought about the Amazon. For generations, the dominant belief had been that the rainforest was too harsh, too nutrient poor, too unpredictable to sustain large, interconnected human settlements. The aerial discoveries challenged that assumption gently but firmly. With every new survey, the forest seemed to whisper, "Look again. You have misunderstood me." What people had long viewed as untouched wilderness was in many places the descendant of landscapes shaped by ancient hands, landscapes managed, engineered, and deliberately arranged. The transition in understanding did not happen overnight. It unfolded slowly, like dawn spreading light across a mist-covered river, and much like a sunrise, it revealed details that had always been there, but were impossible to see in darkness. The earthworks, once invisible beneath the canopy, began to form coherent patterns, networks that hinted not just at isolated villages, but at entire regional systems. Aerial images showed that some earthworks aligned with distant counterparts, suggesting long-distance pathways and coordinated construction. Others appeared to sit at cardinal directions, with entrances positioned in ways that could reflect astronomical events. Such arrangements were not the work of scattered groups. They required leadership, planning, and shared cultural vision. Imagine a researcher sitting at a computer late at night, scrolling slowly over a LIDAR map. Outside, the world is quiet. Inside, the glow of the monitor casts faint light across stacks of notes and field reports. As the map rotates and the forest canopy is digitally removed layer by layer, new terrain forms emerge. Mounds, geometric basins, and long linear features, each one rising from the virtual earth, like ghosts returning to memory. The researcher zooms in, traces the angles. Even through the exhaustion of long hours, a sense of wonder grows. It feels like time travel, like stepping into a world that was always present yet unnoticed. Every new shape is a rediscovered voice, silent for centuries, but now speaking through the contours of the land. Elsewhere in the field, small teams on the ground attempt to reach locations identified by aerial scans. The journey is never simple. They move through dense vegetation, cutting paths through undergrowth, navigating around fallen trunks, and stepping carefully across tangled roots. Mosquitoes form clouds around them. The air is humid and heavy with the scent of wet soil. Hours pass, distances shrink, and progress feels slow. Yet the GPS devices lead them onward, guiding them toward places that appear ordinary at first glance. When they arrive, nothing looks unusual. Ferns grow in soft clusters, saplings sway in the breeze, the ground rises slightly then dips, birds call from above, unconcerned. But when the team compares the LIDAR maps with the terrain beneath their feet, they see the truth. That gentle rise is the wall of an ancient enclosure. That shallow depression is the remnant of a ditch. A straight line of small mounds echoes a boundary that once guided the movement of people between communal spaces. The forest may have softened everything, but the shapes still exist, worn down yet persistent, like faint memories etched into the earth itself. These moments of recognition accumulate. Each discovery supports the next, weaving together a more complete picture of ancient Amazonian life. Some researchers describe the experience as humbling, realizing that for centuries, even knowledgeable observers overlooked these signs simply because they were hidden from the vantage points humans traditionally used. The aerial perspective revealed not only the earthworks, but also a new way of thinking about the forest. Instead of a wilderness untouched by civilization, it became a landscape shaped through long-term adaptation and stewardship. They were designed to work with seasonal flooding patterns, to rely on natural soil cycles, and to sustain agriculture through raised fields and engineered drainage. The forest did not engulf these cities as much as it embraced them after they were gone, letting them dissolve gradually into its living fabric. And so, the aerial clues continued to accumulate, forming a vast, intricate map of what once existed. Each new survey added a thread to the tapestry. Each faint line captured by a drone, each geometric shape revealed by LIDAR, each smooth curve seen from a satellite, expanded the understanding of a world that had long been underestimated. The revelations were gentle but transformative, quiet reminders that human history is never as simple as it seems from the surface. In the end, the forest was not hiding its past out of malice or secrecy. It was simply growing, renewing, and protecting itself. Its canopy shielded the memories beneath, waiting for a time when humans would develop the means and the patience to look from above and recognize what had always been there. For a long time, the world believed the Amazon to be a vast stretch of untouched wilderness, an enormous green sea that had always been wild, empty, and untouched by large, organized human societies. The image persisted for centuries, a forest too dense to shape, too humid to tame, too unforgiving to sustain anything more than small, scattered tribes living lightly on the land. But as new discoveries emerged from beneath the canopy, geometric earthworks, raised roads, fortified settlements, and patterned fields, it became impossible to hold on to that old belief. Something far greater had once lived here. Something organized, intentional, and deeply connected to the land. The people who built these earthworks were not merely surviving in the rainforest. They were shaping it. They understood its rhythms, its soil, its water, its cycles of renewal. And rather than fight the forest, they worked with it, turning its challenges into opportunities. Their story isn't loud or well documented. No written language survived, no grand stone monuments remained, but the earth itself remembers. The ground still holds the imprints of their knowledge, their communities, and their way of life. These quiet imprints tell a story of civilizations far more complex than anyone once imagined. Archaeologists now look at the forest, not as an untouched wilderness, but as a cultural forest, a living landscape molded over generations by human hands. The builders of the Amazonian earthworks lived in societies that may have rivaled the organization of places like ancient Southeast Asia or the river civilizations of Africa. Their engineering was different, softer, adapted to the environment rather than imposed upon it, but no less sophisticated. To understand the people themselves, one must imagine a world where the forest was both home and canvas, where rivers were highways, and where the land was quietly transformed without ever breaking the harmony of nature. The communities of these forgotten regions were not small camps scattered randomly across the jungle. They lived in networks, clusters of settlements connected by long roads of packed earth, raised just enough to stay above seasonal floods. Some lived near geometric enclosures carefully carved into the soil, massive circles, squares, rectangles, and combinations of shapes aligned with the land. Others lived near ring ditches, long sweeping earthworks that enclosed entire village complexes. These weren't fortifications in the traditional sense. Rather, they were boundaries, organizers of space, markers of community identity, and possibly ceremonial structures. People who built these places likely lived in houses arranged in large open plazas. Their villages weren't tangled or chaotic. They were planned. Homes were often circular or oval, arranged in rings around communal areas that served as marketplaces, meeting grounds, or places of ritual. At night, fires might have burned gently in the center of these plazas, casting warm light over families who gathered to share stories or prepare food. Children played under the watchful glow, elders shared knowledge, and the rhythms of life followed a pattern that felt steady and known. Daily life was woven around the land, They grew cassava, maize, sweet potatoes, and an incredible variety of fruits, dozens of which are still central to Amazonian diets today. Their agriculture wasn't destructive. It enriched the soil. Through what is now called terra preta, or dark earth, they created some of the most fertile soil on Earth by mixing charcoal, organic matter, and pottery fragments. This soil remains astonishingly fertile even centuries later, hinting at the depth of their agricultural understanding. Imagine a family tending fields enriched with this homemade soil. The air is warm, silent except for the soft chirps of birds and distant rumbling of insects. They move with practiced motions, loosening roots, carrying woven baskets of harvest, planting new shoots. Their relationship with the land is intimate, built on generations of observation. They know which areas flood and which dry quickly, which patches of forest attract certain animals, and how to manage the understory without harming the greater canopy. Over time, their techniques created what some scientists call anthropogenic forests, regions where the types of trees and plants reflect the preferences and influence of the people who lived there. These societies were not isolated. Many lived along rivers, natural highways connecting countless communities. Canoes carved from enormous tree trunks glided silently along, carrying goods, food, pottery, and stories. People from one settlement might travel for days to visit relatives or trade with neighbors, and along the way they would pass the gigantic outlines of earthworks rising subtly from the ground. Some may have been ceremonial centers, places where festivals or rituals brought together large groups. Others may have been landmarks, marking the edges of shared territory. Their pottery was finely made, decorated with intricate patterns. Some designs featured spirals and geometric motifs, while others portrayed animals, turtles, birds, fish, creatures woven deeply into their worldview. Pottery wasn't just utilitarian, it was symbolic. When fragments of these painted vessels are found in the earth today, they offer glimpses into the aesthetic sensibilities of the people who created them. They were artists as much as engineers, blending form and function in ways that feel timeless. The people also built raised causeways, long, straight paths built of compacted earth, often elevated above marshy land, as allowed them to move effortlessly across regions that would otherwise flood. In a landscape challenging to navigate even today, these paths reveal an extraordinary level of planning. These raised roads connected villages, ceremonial grounds, and fields, forming networks stretching miles across the forest. Anyone traveling along one of these avenues thousands of years ago would have felt the comfort of continuity, knowing that the road was designed with intention and care. Their water management techniques were equally advanced. They built ponds, ditches, and artificial wetlands for fish farming, long before the concept became widely known elsewhere. These systems were sustainable, designed to produce food without depleting natural resources. Imagine walking beside one of these ancient fish ponds during the rainy season. The water is still, reflecting the canopy above. The air smells faintly of wet earth. Fish ripple just below the surface. It was a gentle form of control, working with nature's rhythms rather than imposing upon them. Socially, these were not simple bands of wanderers. They had leaders, spiritual figures, and roles that supported a functioning society. Knowledge was passed orally, stories, songs, and lessons forming a living memory carried by elders and teachers. Rituals likely marked important moments. Planting seasons, river changes, the arrival of migratory animals. Some earthworks appear aligned with the solstices or cardinal directions, hinting at an understanding of celestial cycles. At night, as the forest fell quiet, these people may have watched the stars through clearings shaped by their own hands, using the movements above to guide planting, navigation, or ceremony. Their tools, though simple by modern standards, were perfectly adapted to their world. Stone axes, wooden digging sticks, woven baskets, nets, and fishing traps. Each object reflected generations of refining and learning. Clothes were made from plant fibers and soft woven materials. Ornaments carved from bone, seeds, or shells adorned their bodies, marking identity, status, or affiliation. These were not primitive people. They were practical, skilled, and deeply knowledgeable. One of the most remarkable aspects of these societies was their scale. Some regions now appear to have supported tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of people. The idea of the Amazon as sparsely populated collapses in the face of this evidence. Instead, we must imagine bustling networks of villages, trade routes alive with activity, and landscapes shaped not by a few individuals, but by generations of coordinated effort. These were not mere forest dwellers. They were civilization builders. Even their relationship with fire was intentional. They understood how controlled burning could shape the land without destroying it, promoting the growth of certain plants while reducing the risk of uncontrolled wildfires. Fire, in their hands, was not a threat but a tool, an instrument for renewal. As European contact spread across the continent, everything changed. Diseases arrived long before explorers themselves did, sweeping through interconnected communities and devastating populations. The societies that had thrived for centuries collapsed rapidly, leaving behind the quiet forms of their earthworks and the altered forests that preserved their memory. Over generations, the jungle grew back over the plazas and avenues, covering the structures with roots, vines, and soil. The forest took back what had once been shaped by human hands. Villages became hillocks. Causeways became ridges swallowed by ferns. Earthworks became faint outlines, visible only from the air. But the forest did not erase them. It hid them gently, almost protectively, as if waiting for a time when someone might look again and understand. Today, archaeologists and researchers walk the same ground where children once played, where farmers tended their terra preta fields, where families gathered around evening fires. They see the traces, the contours, the quiet geometry left behind. And with each discovery, the picture becomes clearer. The Amazon was never empty. It was alive with people, innovators, builders, caretakers of the land who shaped the forest every bit as much as it shaped them. To imagine these people is to imagine a society that lived in harmony with the world around them, achieving complexity without the need for towering stone structures or massive cities of granite. Their monuments were carved into the earth, their legacy imprinted in the soil. And though time hid their achievements beneath layers of green, the forest remembers. The land remembers. Every curve of earth, every line, every elevated road whispers of the people who built them, people whose ingenuity and resilience shaped one of the most remarkable environments on earth. Their story, once nearly lost, is slowly waking again. And as we uncover more of their world, we are invited not only to marvel at their achievements, but to rethink the way we understand civilization itself. The people who built these earthworks did not conquer the forest. They collaborated with it. Their legacy is not one of domination, but of coexistence. And in that balance, we may find lessons as valuable today as they were thousands of years ago. The people who built these earthworks lived in a world rich with meaning, where every part of the landscape carried stories handed down through generations. A grove of trees might mark a place of ancestral memory. A bend in the river could have been the site of an old gathering, where elders once spoke of the origins of the forest and the spirits believed to watch over it. These communities were woven tightly into their environment, spiritually, culturally, and practically. The land was not just a resource. It was a companion, a teacher, and a living presence that shaped the rhythm of their days. Their spiritual beliefs were likely tied to natural cycles, to the movement of water and stars, to the mysterious depth of the forest that surrounded them. Night after night, they looked upward at a sky untouched by artificial light, where the Milky Way stretched brightly across the darkness like a river of shimmering dust. Constellations had stories, and those stories served as guides, lessons in survival, harmony, and balance. In some parts of the Amazon, even today, descendants of indigenous groups tell stories of celestial beings who taught early people how to plant, when to gather, and how to read the signs of the sky. It is easy to imagine the builders of the earthworks holding similar beliefs, passed from parent to child beneath flickering firelight. Their rituals may have included songs that echoed through forest clearings and dances performed on nights when the air was thick with the scent of blooming flowers. Drums made from stretched hides could have carried rhythm deep into the trees, while flutes carved from reeds or bones added soft, haunting melodies. These gatherings were likely moments of renewal, where the entire community came together to reaffirm bonds, resolve conflicts, honor ancestors, or simply celebrate the cycles of life that sustained them. Trade was another thread connecting these societies. While the rainforest might appear isolated, it was anything but. Rivers connected regions like veins of blue, allowing people to travel far and wide, trade goods, seeds, pottery, tools, pigments, feathers, resin, fruits, medicinal plants, moved between communities. Key. Along these routes, ideas also traveled. The shapes of earthworks in one region might have influenced designs in another. Agricultural knowledge spread through conversations between travelers, weaving the forest into a network of shared understanding. And although each community had its own customs, languages, and stories, they were united by a common relationship with the land. They understood the delicate balance between using resources and preserving them. Their agriculture mirrored this understanding. Terra preta, the rich, dark soil they created, was a testament to their patience. It was not made overnight. It took generations of adding charcoal, compost, food waste, and broken pottery. The soil became richer every year, capable of supporting crops far more effectively than the nutrient-poor native soil of the rainforest. In a way, terra preta was a record, a cumulative achievement written into the earth, slowly, lovingly, and unintentionally. Walk through these ancient fields during the late afternoon, centuries ago, and you might have seen families tending their crops as beams of golden light filtered through the forest canopy. Children would gather fallen fruit from the forest floor while adults checked the growth of cassava or harvested maize. The forest was not something to conquer, it was something to tend, manage, and respect. They understood which areas should be allowed to regrow, which needed pruning, and which could support cropping without harm. And their agriculture resembled a mosaic. Patches of forest, gardens, orchards, and wild spaces all interwoven in a living system of renewal. The villages themselves likely changed over time, growing or shrinking as populations shifted. Some may have expanded to support large communities, while others remained small family clusters. Yet regardless of size, the arrangement of homes often followed a graceful pattern. Circular spaces symbolized unity. Open plazas encouraged gathering and cooperation. Pathways both within villages and between them reflected generations of movement. Well-trodden routes shaped by countless footsteps. Archaeologists believe these societies were skilled at working with perishable materials. They built houses from wood, palm leaves, and woven fibers. They crafted furniture, tools, musical instruments, baskets, and containers from materials that degraded quickly in the humid environment. Very little of this survived, yet the absence of these objects today does not diminish their significance. The earthworks they left behind represent only a fraction of their world, the durable skeleton of societies that expressed much of their identity through materials that returned to the forest when their purpose was fulfilled. One of the most fascinating aspects of these people was their adaptability. They lived in an environment where seasons were defined not by dramatic changes in temperature, but by the rhythms of rain and flooding. They knew how to predict the rise and fall of rivers, how to store food during wet seasons, and how to maintain pathways in fields, despite the shifting waters. Many earthworks show careful planning to avoid seasonal floods, suggesting that engineers and planners played important roles in community life. Their knowledge of medicine was profound. The Amazon rainforest contains thousands of medicinal plants, and these societies likely knew many of them intimately. They understood which barks reduced fever, which leaves alleviated infection, which roots eased pain. Healers, perhaps chosen from childhood for their sensitivity or intuition, learned to read the signs of illness and cure them with remedies gathered from the forest. This knowledge, like so much else, was transmitted orally, carried through ritual, story, and practice. Communication between villages might have been maintained through signal fires, flute calls, or runners traveling along the causeways. During major gatherings, communities from across many miles may have come together, traveling along raised roads and waterways to share goods, stories, and alliances. These gatherings could have been moments of peace, negotiation, marriage, or celebration, events that strengthened bonds and ensured cooperation during difficult times. Their diets were diverse. Beyond cultivated crops, they fished rivers teeming with life, gathered nuts, hunted game in the understory, and harvested fruits from carefully encouraged forest groves. Archaeological evidence suggests they cultivated or enhanced the presence of dozens of useful species: cacao, Brazil nuts, palm fruits, medicinal vines. This was not random foraging, but long-term ecosystem management. The forest we know today is shaped in part by their preferences, an orchard disguised as wilderness. And yet, despite their achievements, despite the scale of their societies, their world changed swiftly after contact with explorers and the spread of disease. Many communities dwindled to a fraction of their size. Entire regions emptied. Stories that had been carried orally for centuries were lost in a single generation. The forest grew over everything, taking back the plazas, the pathways, the ceremonial ground. But even in its regrowth, the forest preserved the memory of those who once shaped it. Today, as researchers use LIDAR to peel away the canopy digitally, the shapes emerge again, geometric, deliberate, ancient. And though we cannot hear the voices of the people who built them, the earth itself offers clues. The angles and alignments speak of intention. The scale speaks of cooperation. The complexity speaks of intelligence, organization, and community. To imagine these people is to imagine a society that found harmony not by withdrawing from the challenges of nature, but by accepting them, studying them, and working in partnership with them. They lived lives rich with meaning, connection, artistry, and resilience. And even though their names are forgotten and their words no longer echo in the air, their legacy endures, written quietly into the forest floor, waiting patiently for the world to recognize the civilization that once thrived in the heart of the Amazon. To understand the remarkable engineering behind the Amazonian earthworks, one must begin by imagining the world as it existed long before modern tools or machines existed, long before aerial photography and LIDAR surveys revealed the hidden traces of human civilization. The landscape was dense with towering trees, tangled vines, and layers upon layers of undergrowth, stretching as far as the eye could see, or as far as anyone could walk in a day. The forest was alive with sound, insects buzzing, birds calling, the rustle of animals moving unseen through the underbrush. In this living labyrinth, humans worked quietly but intentionally, shaping the land in ways both subtle and profound. What remains of their work today is not only evidence of habitation but of intelligence, planning, and engineering on a scale that has surprised even the most experienced archaeologists. The first aspect to consider is the construction of trenches. These were not simple ditches. They were carefully measured, meticulously placed, and often geometrically precise. Some trenches formed perfect circles. The purpose of these trenches is still debated among researchers. Some may have served ceremonial or symbolic functions, creating defined boundaries for communal or sacred spaces. Others likely had practical purposes, draining water. They were built with intention, depth, and alignment, reflecting a careful understanding of the terrain and its natural tendencies. Imagine a small team of people working together, each with a specific role. Some dig, loosening soil with wooden or stone tools, while others remove debris or carry earth to nearby mounds. The sun is filtered through the canopy above, the air humid and heavy, and the work is slow but deliberate. Lines are measured and remeasured. Angles are checked by eye, using simple tools or alignments with natural landmarks such as trees, hills, or river bends. Over time, a pattern emerges. A trench that forms a perfect circle, perhaps hundreds of meters in diameter, with consistent depth and width. When finished, it creates a deliberate space in the landscape, a mark of human intention that will endure long after the people have moved on. Raised fields represent another astonishing feat of engineering. In a rainforest environment where flooding is common and soil fertility can be uneven, These people developed an ingenious solution. They would elevate plots of land by piling up soil, organic matter, and sometimes charcoal, creating platforms where crops could grow without being submerged during the wet season. These raised fields were carefully leveled and sometimes edged with trenches to manage water flow, prevent erosion, and retain nutrients. Some plots were several meters high and extended for hundreds of meters in length. Imagine walking across one of these fields thousands of years ago, the soil firm beneath your feet, the crops thriving above the surrounding marshes. These fields reflect an intimate understanding of hydrology and soil management, a knowledge that required careful observation over many generations. The construction of plazas also demonstrates remarkable sophistication. Plazas were open spaces around which communities gathered, often central to ceremonial or social life. To build a plaza, workers would clear the ground of trees and undergrowth, level the surface, and sometimes reinforce it with compacted earth or other materials. The shape of a plaza was carefully designed, often circular or rectangular, with precise edges that aligned with other earthworks, paths, or astronomical markers. These open spaces were the heart of the settlement, places where people could meet, celebrate, and organize collective activities. Constructing a plaza was not merely a matter of removing vegetation. It was an act of shaping the landscape to reflect social organization and community cohesion. Causeways, or raised pathways, are another feature that illustrates the engineering ingenuity of these societies. Stretching for kilometers, these pathways connected villages, fields, and ceremonial centers. They were elevated above flood-prone areas built from layers of compacted soil and carefully maintained over time. Some causeways were straight, following precise lines across uneven terrain, while others curved to accommodate natural obstacles or follow astronomical alignments. Walking along one of these causeways centuries ago, one would experience a continuous path linking distant parts of a landscape, facilitating travel, communication, and trade. The planning required for such construction reflects not only technical skill, but also social coordination, as maintaining these structures demanded organized labor and shared knowledge. The labor behind these constructions was immense, yet it was not random. These communities had developed methods to mobilize people efficiently, often combining work with ritual or communal activity. Digging, transporting, and shaping soil required coordination. Teams likely worked together for months, perhaps even years, to complete a single large earthwork. Seasonal cycles may have influenced the timing of construction, with certain tasks undertaken during dry periods when soil was easier to handle and others postponed during heavy rains. This integration of labor, environment, and social organization speaks to a sophisticated understanding of both human and ecological systems. Material selection played a crucial role in construction. Builders utilized the soil available in the surrounding environment, sometimes enhancing it with organic matter or charcoal to improve stability and fertility. Stones were rarely used extensively in most earthworks, not because they were unavailable, but because soil was more adaptable and abundant. Wood, vines, and plant fibers were used for tools, measurement markers, and reinforcement structures. The careful selection and combination of materials indicate not only resourcefulness, but also a deep understanding of material properties and their long-term behavior in a tropical climate. Alignment and measurement were critical in the construction process. While the societies did not use modern instruments, they demonstrated an impressive ability to create large-scale geometric patterns with precision. Straight lines, perfect circles, and parallel avenues suggest the use of simple yet effective tools such as plumb lines, ropes, stakes, and natural sight lines. Observations of the sun, stars, and landmarks likely assisted in ensuring accuracy over large distances. The precision of these structures demonstrates not only technical ability, but also a cultural emphasis on order, symbolism, and the relationship between humans and their environment. Drainage and water management were often integrated into The design of earthworks. Trenches around plazas or fields could direct water away from inhabited areas or redirect it into ponds and wetlands for agricultural use. Elevated causeways prevented flooding of critical pathways, while raised fields allowed crops to thrive despite seasonal inundation. The thoughtful incorporation of water management illustrates a keen awareness of natural patterns and a commitment to creating resilient, long-lasting settlements. Even the process of planning and maintaining these earthworks suggests a sophisticated social organization. Decisions about where to place a plaza, how to shape a trench, or which path a causeway should follow required collaboration, communication, and shared vision. Leaders or skilled planners likely coordinated efforts, while community members provided labor, knowledge, and oversight. The persistence of these structures over centuries indicates that construction was accompanied by careful maintenance and adaptation, ensuring that the earthworks remained functional even as environmental conditions shifted. The scale of construction also hints at population size and labor organization. Some of the largest earthworks would have required hundreds, if not thousands, of people working over extended periods. This implies not only a population capable of supplying labor, but also systems for coordinating work, sharing resources, and sustaining communities during periods of construction. The presence of multiple, interconnected earthworks within a region suggests a high degree of regional coordination, reinforcing the idea of complex, organized societies. Symbolism may have influenced construction as well. Some earthworks align with cardinal directions or celestial events, indicating that the builders considered not only practical and social functions, but also spiritual and symbolic ones. Circles could represent the cosmos, squares may have reflected order, and straight avenues might have guided movement in accordance with ritual practice or cosmological principles. The integration of practical engineering and symbolic meaning adds an additional layer of sophistication to these constructions. Even after centuries, the engineering behind these earthworks is evident. Trenches remain visible as subtle depressions, raised fields form slight ridges across the landscape, and the alignments of causeways can still be traced from above. Modern technology, such as LIDAR and satellite imagery, has revealed these features with unprecedented clarity, yet they were designed to be functional and durable without such assistance. The foresight of these builders ensured that their work could withstand environmental pressures, changes in population, and the slow encroachment of the forest. Construction methods were likely iterative. Communities would build, observe, and refine techniques over generations, gradually improving the durability, efficiency, and functionality of their earthworks. Knowledge was transmitted orally, through demonstration, and through shared participation in building activities. This generational learning contributed to the sophistication and consistency of earthworks across vast regions of the Amazon, allowing similar geometric patterns and techniques to appear hundreds of kilometers apart. In addition, the interaction between different types of structures illustrates the integrated nature of Amazonian engineering. Trenches, plazas, raised fields, and causeways were not isolated features. They functioned together as part of a coordinated system. Water could be channeled from one area to another, movement could be guided along raised paths, and communal spaces were connected to agricultural zones in logical, efficient ways. The landscape was a network of engineered features, each component designed to support the others, reflecting a holistic approach to planning and construction. Maintenance was also integral. Even after initial construction, earthworks required ongoing care. Trenches could fill with sediment, raised fields could erode, and causeways could be damaged by seasonal rains. Communities likely developed strategies for periodic repair, ensuring that structures remained functional for decades or centuries. This commitment to upkeep demonstrates foresight and a long-term vision for community infrastructure, an understanding that engineering was a living, sustained practice rather than a one-time accomplishment. Finally, the engineering of these earthworks reflects a profound harmony between humans and the rainforest. The builders did not seek to dominate the environment. They sought to inhabit it intelligently. Structures were adapted to seasonal flooding, soil conditions, and ecological cycles. Resources were used sustainably. The forest itself was integrated into the design, providing materials, shelter, and guidance. The result is a testament to human ingenuity and partnership with nature. A civilization that sculpted the landscape with precision, care, and enduring purpose. In every trench, every plaza, every raised field, and every causeway, we glimpse a civilization capable of understanding scale, geometry, hydrology, and social coordination. Their work endures not because it was monumental in stone, but because it was intentional, functional, and resilient. The engineering of the Amazonian earthworks represents a remarkable achievement, a civilization building not only for the present, but for generations yet to come, leaving a legacy quietly interwoven with the forest itself, waiting to be discovered and appreciated centuries later. Beyond the practical aspects of construction, the builders also displayed a profound understanding of the interplay between topography and community needs. Hills, valleys, and natural rises were not obstacles. They were opportunities. Elevated ground often became the foundation for plazas or ceremonial mounds, while low-lying areas were managed with drainage systems to prevent flooding. These decisions required careful observation over years, even decades, and reflect a civilization that paid attention not only to the immediate utility of a space, but also to its long-term viability. Each choice was deliberate, every contour of the land considered, and every mound or ditch integrated into a broader vision of the settlement and its surroundings. In some cases, the earthworks were designed to influence water flow on a regional scale. Trenches connected to ponds or channels, causeways directed foot and canoe traffic, and raised fields transformed marshy zones into productive agricultural areas. The builders understood seasonal variation, predicting which areas would flood during the rainy season and which would remain dry. They harnessed these patterns to maintain stable food production and transportation networks, demonstrating a level of ecological literacy that rivals modern environmental engineering. Walking across these fields centuries ago, one would see not chaos, but a carefully managed landscape where water, soil, and human activity were in constant, deliberate dialogue. Even the smallest details mattered. Edges of trenches were often reinforced, angles were carefully aligned, and transitions between raised fields and natural terrain were smoothed for ease of travel. These adjustments may seem minor, but they contributed significantly to the functionality and longevity of the structures. A misaligned ditch could flood a field. Poorly compacted causeway could collapse under repeated use. The builder's attention to detail ensured that each component of the landscape functioned as intended, with resilience built into every meter of soil moved and every mound shaped. The construction process was as much social as it was technical, coordinating large groups of workers, ensuring that everyone understood the plan, and maintaining motivation required leadership, communication, and shared cultural norms. Tasks were likely divided according to skill, age, or experience. Some dug and moved soil, others shaped or compacted it, and still others measured, guided, or inspected the work. Children may have participated in small ways, learning techniques through observation, while elders provided oversight and guidance. In this way, construction became a communal act, blending labor with cultural transmission and embedding knowledge directly into the social fabric of the community. Tools were simple yet effective. Wooden digging sticks, stone axes, and woven baskets may seem primitive to a modern observer, but they were perfectly suited to the environment. The builders understood how to leverage soil properties, and repetitive motion to move vast quantities of earth. Ropes, stakes, and plumb lines likely aided in measurement and alignment, while natural landmarks, trees, hills, and river bends helped guide construction over long distances. This combination of ingenuity and adaptability allowed the creation of enormous geometric forms that remain evident, even under centuries of forest regrowth. Some earthworks exhibit patterns that suggest astronomical knowledge. Circles, squares, and straight avenues often align with the positions of the sun during solstices or other celestial events. These alignments may have served ceremonial purposes, marking the passage of seasons or guiding ritual activity. Integrating such symbolic considerations into practical engineering required a sophisticated understanding of both geometry and the natural world, blending functional and spiritual objectives seamlessly. The builders were not only engineers and planners but also observers of the cosmos, embedding meaning into the very fabric of the earth. Maintenance was integral to the engineering process. Trenches required clearing of debris and sediment, raised fields needed periodic reinforcement, and causeways had to be compacted and reshaped after the rains. Communities developed routines to ensure the longevity of their work, combining daily upkeep with seasonal or generational projects. This ongoing care ensured that the earthworks could serve their intended functions for decades and perhaps centuries, illustrating a long-term perspective rarely associated with pre-Columbian rainforest societies. Furthermore, the construction methods reflect a balance between human effort and environmental respect. The builders moved vast quantities of earth, but they did so without stripping the landscape of its vitality. Trees were pruned rather than cut indiscriminately, and areas left fallow regenerated naturally. Raised fields and causeways often incorporated existing vegetation, allowing the land to continue supporting biodiversity even as it was modified for human use. This approach demonstrates a nuanced understanding of sustainability, engineering that enhances productivity without permanently degrading the ecosystem. The integration of multiple types of structures into a single landscape shows remarkable planning. Trenches, plazas, raised fields, and causeways were not scattered randomly. They were interconnected, forming coherent systems designed to facilitate movement, support agriculture, manage water, and provide communal space. For instance, a causeway might lead from a village plaza to a raised field. Similarly, trenches could channel water toward ponds or wetlands, creating a self-regulating system that balanced human needs with the rhythms of the forest. It is also likely that these societies engaged in iterative improvement. Initial constructions would have been tested, observed, and refined over time. Builders learned from experience, adjusting the dimensions of trenches, the slope of causeways, or the height of raised fields to better withstand environmental conditions. Knowledge was cumulative, passed down through generations, ensuring that each new generation of earthworks benefited from the lessons of the past. This iterative process produced landscapes that were not static but dynamic, evolving with the needs of the people and the changing conditions of the environment. The social dimension of construction cannot be overstated. Earthworks were labor-intensive, requiring coordination and cooperation at a scale that suggests complex social organization. Large projects may have been tied to ceremonial events, with work itself integrated into communal activities, reinforcing social bonds and cultural cohesion. Participation in construction could have been both a practical necessity and a means of social education, teaching younger members of the community skills, values, and knowledge essential to survival and prosperity. Building the landscape was as much about shaping society as it was about shaping soil. Even after the collapse of these societies following European contact, the engineering principles they employed remained resilient. Trenches, raised fields, and causeways persisted beneath the forest canopy, preserved by the forest itself. The durability of their constructions, combined with the regenerative capacity of the ecosystem, has allowed modern researchers to rediscover them centuries later, revealing a level of technical sophistication that continues to inspire awe. The forest may have grown over these structures, but it has not erased them. The geometry, alignment, and integration of the earthworks still testify to the ingenuity of their builders. Modern technology, such as LIDAR, has dramatically enhanced our understanding of these constructions. By mapping the forest floor beneath dense vegetation, researchers have been able to see the scale, precision, and complexity of the earthworks in ways that were impossible from the ground alone. LIDAR reveals networks of trenches, causeways stretching for kilometers, plazas aligned with astronomical events, and raised fields carefully engineered to manage water and soil fertility. The technology allows us to appreciate the planning and effort required to create these landscapes, and to imagine the human activity that once animated them. These discoveries challenge long-held assumptions about pre-Columbian Amazonian societies. For decades, the prevailing narrative portrayed the rainforest as sparsely populated and inhospitable to complex civilizations. The engineering of the earthworks demonstrates that this was not the case. The people who built these structures were capable of large-scale planning, precise construction, resource management, and long-term maintenance. Their landscapes were carefully crafted to support dense populations, productive agriculture, and social cohesion, all within the context of one of the world's most challenging environments. In conclusion, the construction of Amazonian earthworks represents a remarkable fusion of technical skill, ecological knowledge, social organization, and cultural expression. Trenches, plazas, raised fields, and causeways were not isolated feats. They were part of an integrated adaptive system that allowed societies to thrive in harmony with the rainforest. These structures were functional, resilient, and often symbolic, reflecting both the practical and spiritual dimensions of life in the Amazon. By studying their construction, we gain insight not only into the ingenuity of these ancient builders, but also into a worldview in which human activity and natural systems were intertwined, balanced, and sustained over centuries. The earthworks endure as silent witnesses to a civilization that shaped the land with care, precision, and foresight, leaving a legacy that continues to captivate and inspire generations of researchers, explorers, and dreamers alike. The rainforest has a way of holding secrets. Its dense canopy, tangled undergrowth, an endless expanse act as both a shield and a veil, preserving what human eyes have long forgotten. The Amazon, in particular, is not simply a forest. It is a living archive, a keeper of memories buried beneath layers of green. For centuries, the earthworks constructed by ancient civilizations remained hidden, their precise geometry invisible to anyone walking the forest floor. Yet, in their concealment, they were preserved. The forest protected them, cradled them, allowing them to endure long after the people who built them vanished from the landscape. Understanding why the rainforest was able to preserve these structures requires a deep look at the interplay of ecology, human engineering, and time itself. The first element of preservation is the canopy. Trees in the Amazon grow tall and thick, forming a ceiling that limits sunlight and suppresses the growth of competing plants beneath. Beneath this canopy, undergrowth struggles to establish itself fully, allowing the outlines of human-made structures to remain subtly intact. Trenches and raised fields, though softened by centuries of leaf litter and sediment, retain their shape precisely because the forest protected the soil from rapid erosion and extreme weathering. The canopy also moderates temperature and humidity at ground level, reducing the rate at which organic matter decays and maintaining the integrity of the earthworks over generations. The dense foliage also acted as a barrier against human interference. While early European explorers and later settlers often overlooked the deeper reaches of the forest, the jungle made access difficult. Paths into these areas were obscured by thickets, rivers, and marshes. Villages, causeways, and plazas could remain untouched simply because reaching them required effort and knowledge that few possessed. In this way, the forest itself functioned as a guardian, shielding these structures from the destructive forces of human settlement. Logging or agriculture for centuries, rivers and seasonal flooding also played a role in preservation. Many earthworks were located near waterways, both for practical reasons and as part of an intentional landscape design. Flooding could have been destructive, washing away soils and altering the shape of fields or causeways. Yet the ancient builders accounted for this by elevating fields, reinforcing causeways, and creating drainage systems. These measures allowed the structures to survive the natural ebb and flow of water, while the surrounding forest slowly reclaimed any unprotected areas. The result was a landscape that was both engineered and protected, a delicate balance between human design and environmental forces. The composition of the soil itself contributed to preservation. In many areas where earthworks are found, the soil has been enriched over generations with organic matter, charcoal, and pottery fragments, creating the dark, fertile terra preta. This enriched soil is not only ideal for agriculture, but also remarkably stable over time. Trenches cut into terra preta, raised fields constructed atop it, and causeways built with its compacted layers resisted erosion better than the surrounding, unfertilized soil. Even after centuries of neglect, the enriched soil maintained the form of these earthworks, a quiet testament to both the ingenuity of the builders and the resilience of the landscape. Vegetation also preserved the contours of the land by stabilizing the soil. Roots anchored mounds and raised fields, preventing them from collapsing under the weight of rain or wind. Ground cover, leaf litter, and fallen debris added layers of protection, reducing the impact of rainfall and limiting the speed of erosion. The forest's own growth cycles effectively quilted the earthworks into the natural environment, maintaining their shape even while covering them with vegetation. Walking through these areas, it is possible to step lightly over depressions and rises that follow ancient patterns, subtle reminders of human intervention long hidden beneath the green. The jungle's preservation extends to the absence of mechanical disruption. Unlike modern urban or agricultural environments where construction, plowing, or machinery would quickly erase subtle earthworks, the Amazon remained largely untouched by large-scale human disturbance for centuries. Fires, which could have destroyed delicate soil structures, were generally natural and infrequent, and when humans did use fire, it was controlled and limited in scope. The combination of low-intensity human activity and natural ecological stability allowed the earthworks to remain remarkably intact despite the passage of time. Itself played a role in the preservation. While centuries of growth covered the earthworks, they also allowed the forest to stabilize and integrate them into its ecosystem. Fallen leaves, sediment deposition, and natural plant growth gradually softened the lines of mounds and trenches without erasing them entirely. In essence, the forest acted like a gentle hand, smoothing the contours, adding protective layers, and embedding the structures within a living, dynamic system. This slow accumulation of organic matter protected the shapes from abrupt environmental change, creating a hidden but enduring record of ancient human activity. Another factor is the interplay between the scale of construction and the forest's regenerative capacity. Many earthworks were built on a scale that was large enough to resist complete absorption by vegetation, yet integrated enough into the landscape that the forest could grow around them without obliterating them. Large mounds and raised causeways remained visible as subtle ridges, while shallow trenches could be inferred by depressions in the terrain. Even when individual structures became less distinct at ground level, their arrangement and alignment persisted across the landscape, forming patterns detectable by modern aerial imaging technology such as LIDAR. The forest preserved not only individual features, but the overall organization of the ancient settlements. Seeds, pollen, plant remains, and even traces of domesticated species survived in the soil, often hidden beneath layers of leaf litter and sediment. By preserving these organic materials, the jungle has allowed researchers to reconstruct the diet, agriculture, and ecological management strategies of the people who built the earthworks. The forest is, in this sense, both a preserver and a narrator, holding clues to the interaction between humans and their environment in a way that no stone monument could. In addition, the rainforest preserved the memory of the earthworks through subtle ecological signals. Certain plant species flourish in areas enriched by ancient human activity. Orchards disguised as wild forest, groves of edible or useful trees, and patches of terra preta all indicate past management. Even when human presence seems absent, these biological markers allow modern researchers to detect and trace ancient settlements. The jungle, in preserving its flora, has preserved a living record of human habitation, a record that speaks not in words but in patterns, growth, and distribution. The canopy also provided protection from sunlight, wind, and heavy rainfall, reducing the rate of weathering. Exposed soil erodes faster, while shaded and sheltered ground retains its structure. The forest's multi-layered growth created a microclimate, moderating the extremes of temperature and moisture. This stable environment ensured that the shapes of mounds, trenches, and raised fields did not collapse under the weight of sudden storms or prolonged wet seasons. Even as humans moved on and populations declined, the forest itself maintained the form of these landscapes. Moreover, the jungle preserved these structures through obscurity. For centuries, explorers, colonists, and even local inhabitants passed over or around these areas, unaware of their presence. The dense growth hid the earthworks from casual observation. Paths, rivers, and natural terrain diverted attention away from them, allowing these structures to survive without interference. In this sense, preservation was as much about invisibility as it was about stability. Hidden from sight, the earthworks could endure without disruption, gradually becoming part of the forest itself. The forest's preservation also reflects the foresight of the original builders. Their construction methods inherently resisted environmental degradation. Trenches were dug with attention to slope and drainage. Raised fields were elevated and compacted, and causeways were carefully reinforced. This careful engineering ensured that the structures could survive floods, erosion, and natural decay. The builders created landscapes that were self-sustaining, resilient, and integrated with the ecology around them. In doing so, they unwittingly collaborated with the forest in preserving their legacy. Over centuries, the jungle has acted as both a cover and a conservator, hiding the earthworks while keeping them remarkably intact. When modern technology finally revealed them, it was as if the forest itself had been waiting for the right moment for the world to rediscover what had been there all along. LIDAR images show clear geometric forms beneath the dense green canopy, and field studies confirm the existence of elevated causeways, trenches, and plazas exactly where the data indicate. The forest preservation is not perfect. The edges of mounds have softened, trenches partially filled, but it is remarkable given the passage of time, demonstrating the durability of both human engineering, ecological stewardship. The preservation of these earthworks also speaks to the resilience of the Amazon itself. While the forest has changed, shifted, and regrown over centuries, it has maintained the forms of human construction within its layers. This interplay between human design and ecological recovery reveals a unique story, one in which human ingenuity and natural processes coexist. In this way, the earthworks are not simply remnants of the past. They are part of a continuum of life, memory, and renewal. Even today, researchers walking through these areas are struck by the subtlety of preservation. A shallow mound beneath ferns, a barely perceptible ridge through a clearing, a line of trees following the edge of an ancient trench, all hint at human activity long forgotten. The preservation is quiet, almost secretive, requiring careful observation to detect. It is only when modern tools, patience, and a trained eye come together that the full scale and precision of these constructions are revealed. The forest has kept these structures hidden, yes, but in doing so, it has also ensured that their rediscovery is a moment of wonder, revelation, and profound respect for both nature and human ingenuity. In many ways, the jungle became the ultimate conservator of human history. Unlike stone structures exposed to the elements or monuments subject to human destruction, these earthworks were sheltered by a dynamic ecosystem that both softened and sustained them. The canopy, the soil, the water, the vegetation, all played a part in preserving the legacy of societies that thrived long before European contact. Through centuries of growth, decay, and regrowth, the rainforest ensured that the memory of these civilizations would endure, waiting for a time when humanity would have the tools, curiosity, and patience to see them once again. In conclusion, the rainforest preserved these ancient earthworks for centuries because of its density, its ecology, and its interaction with human construction. The canopy shielded the ground, the soil maintained stability, vegetation reinforced structures, and obscurity prevented disruption. The builder's own engineering complemented these natural forces, creating landscapes that were durable, adaptive, and integrated into the environment. Time and nature worked together. When they were finally revealed through modern technology, the precision, scale, and intention behind them astonished the world, confirming that the jungle had been not just a barrier, but a protector, a living archive of human achievement, quietly safeguarding the memory of civilizations long gone. Beyond the immediate protection of the canopy and the soil, the jungle's ability to preserve these structures lies in the forest's natural cycles. Trees grow, shed leaves, and die, creating layers of organic matter that gradually accumulate over time. This layer acts like a gentle blanket, cushioning the earthworks from erosion caused by rainfall or wind. Fallen leaves, branches, and decomposing plant material slowly build up, softening edges while keeping the overall form intact. In a way, the forest nurtured the earthworks, covering them as if tucking them in, ensuring that time and the elements did not wear away the precision of the trenches, mounds, and causeways beneath. Seasonal rhythms of the rainforest also played a protective role. The ebb and flow of the rivers, the annual flooding of certain lowlands, and the patterns of rainfall created predictable conditions that the ancient builders had already anticipated. Elevated fields and causeways were designed to rise above these seasonal waters, and the surrounding jungle helped to anchor soil in place. The natural resilience of the ecosystem, combined with the foresight of the people who shaped it, created a dynamic yet stable environment in which the earthworks could survive for centuries. Where one might expect the forces of a tropical forest to erase human traces, they instead became part of a collaborative preservation. The jungle's diversity further reinforced this protection. Plants with deep root systems anchored mounds and terraces, while vines and smaller shrubs protected edges from crumbling. Even the smallest plants contributed, forming a dense mat that shielded soil from heavy rainfall. Insects and animals, too, played a subtle role in the ongoing stability of the landscape. By dispersing seeds and helping maintain ecological balance, they ensured that the forest's regenerative power continued, indirectly safeguarding the structures created long ago. Every living organism in the forest, from towering trees to tiny fungi, participated in a slow, almost imperceptible preservation effort. The forest also prevented large-scale human disruption, which is critical in understanding why these earthworks remained hidden. For centuries, most human activity was concentrated along navigable rivers or open plains. Deep within the rainforest, the earthworks were obscured by dense growth and difficult terrain. Paths were overgrown, rivers meandered unpredictably, and natural obstacles like swamps and hills diverted attention. Even when humans ventured into these regions, the subtle ridges, mounds, and depressions were often mistaken for natural formations. The jungle, in essence, hid its secrets in plain sight, waiting for the development of modern technology that would reveal them. Technology such as LIDAR has shown just how cleverly the rainforest preserved these structures. From the ground, the earthworks appear nearly invisible, overlaid by vegetation that disguises geometry, straight lines, and perfect circles. From above, however, the hidden shapes emerge with astonishing clarity. The forest's dense canopy protects the soil but also conceals human design. Without the jungle's growth and the protective layers of vegetation, the earthworks might have been destroyed by exposure to sunlight, rain, or human interference long ago. The forest's concealment was a form of preservation, a way of keeping these ancient achievements intact until the world was ready to see them again. Preservation also occurred because of the careful placement and construction of the earthworks themselves. Trenches, plazas, causeways, and raised fields were built to complement the environment rather than fight it. Elevation and drainage were incorporated with foresight, soil composition was considered, and vegetation was allowed to coexist with human structures. By designing their work in harmony with natural systems, the builders created constructions resilient enough to survive both environmental and temporal pressures. In essence, their engineering partnered with the forest's resilience, ensuring that centuries of growth would not erase their legacy. Time and the forest together created subtle layers of memory embedded in the soil. Pollen, seeds, and plant remains were preserved beneath layers of organic matter, allowing modern researchers to study the diet, agriculture, and ecology of ancient communities. These preserved materials provide insight into what crops were grown, which plants were managed or encouraged, and how humans interacted with the surrounding environment. Even after the collapse of these civilizations, the rainforest maintained traces of human activity, a living archive hidden beneath the dense green canopy. The forest's preservation extends to the shape and alignment of structures. Geometric precision, which might be eroded in open terrain, remained remarkably intact under the protective layers of the jungle. Raised causeways kept their form because surrounding vegetation absorbed water and stabilized soil. Trenches retained their outlines, partially filled with sediment but still traceable. Plazas, once bustling with human activity, now lie silent but discernible, their edges reinforced over centuries by plant growth. The jungle, in its slow and patient way, has acted as a conservator, preserving not only the material, but also the intention of these constructions. Even subtle features, such as slight depressions, alignments, and soil color variations, have survived because of the rainforest. These features may have been invisible to casual observers, but modern imaging and careful excavation reveal their presence. The preservation is both physical and informational. The forest has maintained the form of these structures, and in doing so, preserved the story of the people who built them. The rainforest holds evidence of social organization, engineering skill, agricultural innovation, and environmental understanding, all encoded in the very contours of the land. Natural succession also contributed to preservation. Over centuries, as older plants died and new ones grew, the soil was gradually enriched and stabilized. Fallen leaves and decaying plant matter created a thick humus layer, which protected underlying structures from erosion and compaction. Forest regeneration occurred in a way that smoothed but did not erase human-made features, integrating them into the ecosystem. The result is a landscape that appears natural at first glance but retains the fingerprints of human activity beneath every ridge and depression. The interplay of concealment and preservation is particularly striking. The jungle hid the earthworks from human eyes while protecting them from environmental degradation. Even when explorers or local inhabitants traversed these regions, the dense vegetation made the structures difficult to detect. When they were eventually revealed, it was through patient observation and technological assistance that their scale and precision became apparent. The forest had waited, holding its secrets, ensuring that when rediscovered, the story of the Amazonian civilizations would emerge fully intact. The jungle also preserved the agricultural genius of the builders. Raised fields, enriched soils, and planned orchards survived under layers of organic growth. Even without human management, many of these areas continued to support crops, edible plants, and forest species shaped by ancient cultivation. The rainforest acted as a silent steward of food production, maintaining fertility and preserving the interaction between humans and the ecosystem. Seeds and plant remnants buried in the soil provide archaeologists with clues about the species cultivated, their spread, and how the forest itself was influenced by human activity. Some networks of earthworks stretch for hundreds of kilometers, indicating not only substantial populations but also the logistical capability to plan, coordinate, and maintain infrastructure over vast distances. These were not small, isolated communities, eking out a subsistence existence. They were civilizations capable of large-scale engineering, agricultural innovation, and social organization, a reality that contradicts centuries of assumptions about the rainforest's limits. The implications of these discoveries extend beyond archaeology into the broader understanding of human-environment interaction. For so long, the Amazon was seen as a place where humans could only survive temporarily, adapting to the forest but never shaping it in lasting ways. The Earthworks show that this view was not only incomplete but fundamentally wrong. These societies did more than inhabit the forest. They managed it. They created fertile soils, controlled water flow, engineered transportation networks, and planned settlements with precision and foresight. Their actions transformed the rainforest into a living, dynamic system that supported agriculture, trade, and social cohesion across generations. Modern researchers now recognize that humans and the Amazon did not merely coexist, they co-evolved, influencing each other in profound ways. The discoveries also highlight the ingenuity of these societies. The design of trenches, raised fields, and causeways reflects an understanding of hydrology, soil science, and landscape management that rivals modern engineering principles. Elevated fields allowed for crop production despite seasonal flooding, while causeways connected distant communities across wetlands and marshes. Trenches and drainage systems controlled water, preventing erosion and sustaining agriculture. Plazas and ceremonial spaces indicate social and spiritual planning integrated with practical considerations. The sophistication of this engineering demonstrates that these civilizations were not simple. They were capable of long-term planning, observation, and adaptation. What we once thought impossible in the Amazon, the creation of dense, organized societies, was not only possible, it was achieved with brilliance. Modern technology has been crucial in revealing the full extent of these achievements. LIDAR, or light detection and ranging, has allowed researchers to peer beneath the dense canopy, uncovering earthworks that are otherwise invisible from the ground. Satellite imagery, drones, and GPS mapping complement these discoveries, providing detailed data on the scale, alignment, and organization of ancient settlements. What emerges is a picture of a highly networked landscape, where villages, plazas, and agricultural fields are connected through causeways and waterways. The rainforest, once assumed to hide only small traces of human activity, instead conceals a vast, organized civilization whose ingenuity rivals that of ancient societies elsewhere in the world. These discoveries also force a reconsideration of historical population estimates. Previous models suggested that the Amazon could support only small groups of people. Yet the density and scale of the earthworks indicate populations far larger than once believed, with settlements capable of sustaining thousands of inhabitants. The existence of fertile terra preta soils, carefully managed raised fields, and extensive infrastructure points to communities that thrive for centuries, suggesting not only large populations but also advanced knowledge of agriculture, resource management, and environmental adaptation. The idea that the rainforest was a marginal, inhospitable environment is increasingly untenable. Instead, it emerges as a space that could sustain dense, complex societies under the right circumstances. In addition to reshaping historical understanding, these discoveries have profound cultural implications. LIDAR and satellite imagery reveal the structures, soil analysis uncovers ancient agricultural practices, botanical studies illuminate the crops and plant management, and ethnography contextualizes human activity. This collaborative approach demonstrates that uncovering the past is rarely the work of a single discipline. It is an ongoing conversation between different fields, each contributing pieces to a much larger puzzle. The Amazonian earthworks exemplify the richness of such interdisciplinary work. The discoveries also underscore the resilience and creativity of human societies facing environmental challenges. Tropical forests are often perceived as hostile due to humidity, flooding, and soil limitations. Yet these civilizations adapted their engineering, agriculture, and settlement, planning to thrive. Raised fields prevented crops from drowning, drainage systems managed water, and fertile terra preta soils ensured reliable harvests. The people of the Amazon demonstrate that humans are capable of transforming perceived limitations into opportunities, adapting technologies, strategies, and social structures to succeed in even the most challenging environments. Culturally, the rediscovery of these earthworks reclaims a history long overlooked. For centuries, indigenous societies of the Amazon have been marginalized, their contributions ignored or minimized. The earthworks, however, provide tangible evidence of achievement, innovation, and resilience. They reveal that the cultural heritage of the rainforest is deep, sophisticated, and enduring. By acknowledging these accomplishments, contemporary societies can better understand the richness of indigenous knowledge, the complexity of historical human-environment interaction, and the long-lasting legacies of civilizations once thought impossible. The discoveries also inspire wonder and curiosity about what remains hidden. If extensive earthworks have survived beneath centuries of jungle, it is possible that other civilizations, settlements, and cultural sites remain undiscovered. The Amazon is a living archive containing layers of human history waiting to be explored. Each new discovery challenges assumptions, enriches knowledge, and encourages deeper investigation. The forest preserves its secrets patiently, inviting modern explorers, archaeologists, and scientists to read its story carefully and respectfully. Moreover, these findings have practical implications for conservation and environmental planning. Recognizing that the Amazon was once densely populated and actively managed challenges the idea that human activity is inherently destructive to tropical ecosystems. Ancient practices such as soil enrichment, agroforestry, and water management may provide models for sustainable land use today. By studying these techniques, modern societies can gain insight into maintaining productivity, biodiversity, and resilience in tropical forests, linking the past to solutions for present and future challenges. Finally, the uncovering of Amazonian earthworks reshapes the narrative of human history. It shows that complexity, ingenuity, and cultural achievement are not confined to the traditional centers of civilization in Europe, Asia, or the Near East. It broadens the understanding of human potential, revealing that societies can thrive, innovate, and transform their environment in ways previously underestimated. The Amazon, once imagined as a marginal wilderness, becomes a testament to human adaptability, creativity, and endurance, a region where history is literally written into the landscape, waiting patiently for discovery. In conclusion, the discovery of Amazonian earthworks profoundly changes our understanding of the rainforest and its peoples. It reveals that the Amazon was home to sophisticated, organized, and innovative societies capable of large-scale engineering, sustainable agriculture, and social cohesion. It challenges assumptions about environmental limits, population density, and the nature of civilization. These findings illuminate the brilliance of indigenous knowledge, the resilience of human societies, and the remarkable partnership between humans and the rainforest. By uncovering these earthworks, we are reminded that history is never fully known, and that the Amazon still holds secrets capable of transforming our understanding of the past. The rainforest, in hiding and preserving these structures, offers not only a window into ancient civilizations, but also a mirror reflecting humanity's capacity for ingenuity, adaptation, and harmonious coexistence with the natural world. Beyond the immediate impact on historical understanding, these discoveries force us to reconsider the very ways in which humans interact with their environment. For centuries, the Amazon was perceived as a hostile, untamable wilderness of human existence. Yet the earthworks tell a different story, one in which human creativity, labor, and foresight were not only possible, but remarkably effective in transforming the landscape into a sustainable home. Raised fields, causeways, and trenches demonstrate careful observation of rainfall patterns, soil composition, and hydrology. This was not the trial and error of a scattered population struggling to survive. It was purposeful, deliberate engineering designed to sustain communities over generations. In today's understanding, the Amazon is not simply a passive backdrop for human life. It was a co-creator of civilization. The technological sophistication implied by these discoveries also reframes the narrative of human innovation in the pre-Columbian Americas. Historically, the focus has been on stone architecture, monumental cities, and written records. The Amazonian earthworks, however, show that ingenuity does not always require stone or writing. Humans can manipulate earth, water, and vegetation to achieve complex and durable outcomes. This challenges traditional assumptions about what constitutes a civilization, social organization, engineering, environmental management, and cultural expression, evident in the precise alignments of plazas and the careful construction of raised fields, emerge as equally valid markers of societal complexity. These civilizations were highly adaptive, combining ecological knowledge with social coordination to flourish in one of the most challenging environments on the planet. Modern rediscovery also reshapes the understanding of indigenous histories. For too long, the contributions and sophistication of Amazonian peoples were marginalized or underestimated in mainstream history. The earthworks demonstrate not only technical skill, but also long-term vision and cultural continuity. Planning networks that span tens or even hundreds of kilometers, complex political and social organization, coordination across multiple settlements, and systems for maintaining food production, transport, and ceremonial life. The traditional narrative that indigenous communities were small, scattered, and technologically limited is no longer tenable. Instead, the evidence points to advanced societies with rich social structures, capable of interacting with the environment on a massive scale. The ecological implications are profound. Contemporary conservation efforts often emphasize the need to preserve the Amazon as untouched wilderness, assuming that human influence is inherently destructive. Yet these discoveries reveal that human activity can enhance environmental productivity and biodiversity when guided by knowledge and care. Raised fields prevented flooding, soil enrichment increased fertility, and carefully planned causeways minimized disruption to water flow. The landscape was managed in ways that sustained both human communities and the forest ecosystem. In understanding these ancient practices, modern society gains insights into sustainable land use, offering lessons for agriculture, conservation, and climate resilience today. The Amazonian civilizations were engineers not only of human life, but also of ecological balance. Archaeology also benefits from these revelations. Areas once considered marginal or empty are now recognized as sites of extensive human habitation. LIDAR has revealed vast networks of causeways connecting settlements, large plazas for ceremonial gatherings, and raised fields capable of supporting intensive agriculture. Each discovery enriches the story of the Amazon, demonstrating that human influence is more widespread and sophisticated than previously imagined. The very scale of these projects, stretching across forests, rivers, and wetlands, challenges prior assumptions that dense tropical forests could not sustain complex societies. What was once thought impossible is now clearly documented. The discoveries also illuminate the adaptability of these societies. They transform these challenges into advantages, developing engineering solutions that integrated seamlessly with natural processes. Raised fields lifted crops above floodwaters, trenches controlled runoff, and causeways enabled reliable transportation. In doing so, these civilizations demonstrated that environmental constraints are not necessarily limitations. They are opportunities for ingenuity. Today, this serves as a reminder of human creativity, adaptability, and the capacity to live harmoniously within complex ecosystems. Culturally, the earthworks redefine the Amazon as a historical landscape rather than a static wilderness. Each mound, trench, and causeway reflects human intent, planning, and social cohesion. The alignments of plazas with celestial events suggest ceremonial and spiritual considerations integrated into daily life. Roads and causeways indicate social networks, trade, and communication. The rainforest becomes a repository of human knowledge and cultural expression, encoding histories, traditions, and achievements directly into the landscape. This recognition allows us to view the Amazon not merely as a natural wonder, but as a place shaped over centuries by human hands, as human hands reflecting intelligence, creativity, and adaptability. The discoveries also prompt a reevaluation of population dynamics, and early estimates suggested sparse populations unable to sustain complex settlements. Yet the density of earthworks, the scale of agricultural infrastructure, and the interconnectedness of villages indicate populations far larger than previously believed. Communities of thousands, potentially tens of thousands, would have required careful management of resources, planning for water, soil fertility, and social cohesion. These were not isolated experiments. They were durable, thriving civilizations capable of sustaining themselves for centuries. 2. The Amazon emerges as a region of historical significance, revealing the scope and scale of human life that once flourished within its depths. Modern technology has amplified the significance of these discoveries. LIDAR imaging allows researchers to penetrate the dense canopy, revealing hidden geometric structures and networks previously invisible from the ground. Drone surveys and satellite imagery supplement these findings, offering precise maps of ancient settlement patterns. This integration of technology with field archaeology enables a comprehensive understanding of Amazonian civilizations, showing not only isolated structures, but entire regions shaped by human activity. The rainforest, which once hid these societies from view, now presents a detailed record, preserved by its own growth and patiently waiting to be studied. The Amazonian earthworks are not merely remnants of the past. They are enduring evidence of what humans can achieve when knowledge, vision, and adaptation meet the challenges of the natural world. Rediscovering them changes not only what we know about history, but also how we imagine the possibilities of human life within the living landscape of the rainforest.